Welcome to the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports podcast. It's a podcast now. If you've taken the course, theoryofdfs.com, it's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass, all the game theory of DFS for all sports. It's concepts that apply regardless if you play NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, esports, any platform, any site. The concepts that most of the top pros utilize that you may not, and that's what's giving them an edge, especially in GPPs, over you. And I'm one of the co-instructors, Jordan Cooper, and I'm joined for this first episode. We'll be doing this every week, probably on Tuesdays, going over some of the decision making that we've made in past slates. Talk about some of the concepts, how the DFS landscape has changed, how to apply some of the concepts that you may have listened to in the audio course. And I know James did the main course with me, and James is great at modeling, not physical modeling, but analytics, that type of stuff, which is not necessarily my strength. I know the basics, but I'm not advanced with that. I'm more into the game theory aspects, and I play primarily, other than cash games, large field GPPs. So I wanted to bring on as a new instructor, if you want to call him an instructor, Erik Beimfohr, who you focus primarily on the small field, single entry, 3 max, more in the higher stakes, the live final qualifiers, those types of contests where you're not building 100 lineups. Like, I play those contests. I play the power sweep in NFL or the spy single entry, but that's like the secondary part. Like, it's almost like I'll make a cash lineup and then I'll focus very heavily on my $9 slant builds, my Millie Maker build. Like, I'm building 100 lineups and I'm maximizing correlation, maximizing leverage. Like, I'm looking for first place equity. These lineups are like I need to get to the sky. Yet in the smaller field stuff, that's typically what I do like an hour before and go, okay, what are my best directions? Because I'm looking at the field. I'm looking to exploit what other people are doing. And I can find 20 different directions to go. So it's like in 100 lineups, let me try all 20 directions and maybe one of them hits. But in these small field contests, you have to kind of pick your 3 best directions. And then it may be really close. So you have a lot more experience with those types of contests with great success. And they're easier to win, but the competition in those contests are harder. So one for the first episode, at least explain your background in why you focus on those contests versus the large field or the cash games.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I'm excited to have this chat with you every week. I've found that talking to people like you has really helped my process too. Nobody knows everything. I still make mistakes.
I don't know anything. I make mistakes all the time. People sometimes look at my lineups, one of my lineups in the slant and go, "Why'd you play this guy and that guy together?" I go, "Because I made a mistake. Because right. 1 out of 100 lineups, I missed it. I screwed up."
Right. So it's good to kind of look back. I like to look back at past slates and analyze it. Not just from shit, that guy scored 10 points. I shouldn't have played him. That's obvious. But looking at what other people are doing, looking at roster builds, look at what my roster build was, and see where I made mistakes or where it was successful. Even like I didn't have a great week 5, but I don't feel too. It's one of those kind of rare weeks, I guess, where I don't really feel too bad about most of the decisions. So, bringing it back to like my kind of approach, I got into DFS. I can't even remember. It's kind of been a while now, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. Not at the very beginning. But I wasn't a poker player. I was more so a sports bettor, but just kind of recreational gambler, degenerate, whatever, having fun, playing sports, etc. And played season long, everything. And got into DFS and tried everything. I tried, playing a bunch of teams in the Sunday Million. I tried, FanDuel was where I started. I tried, playing the Wildcat, whatever. I tried a bunch of different stuff. And then with, everybody gets lucky here and there. I got a little lucky early on, but I had no idea what I was doing. And then, you piss away all those early winnings because you think you know everything. And then I just started experimenting with like, okay, let's stop for a second here and figure out what am I doing? How can I actually win at this? Like dumping 20, $25 entries into this huge contest. I'm just donating every week. I'm hitting the deposit button every single week. And I was like, okay, if I try these smaller field contests, at the time I could maybe afford $50 or $100 as like an entry fee into the, maybe on a good week, a few $100 on these, smaller fields where I have to compete against less people. Yes, they're better. Like you said, if you play the luxury box as an example now, at higher stakes, I mean, the competition is tough. It's all the best players in the world and it's their best lineups. So the cash line is definitely higher. However, the winning score is typically a whole lot lower. So I just started there, not even really understanding like the game theory aspect and all that. I'm like, okay, this makes sense to me because I suck at making a bunch of teams. I'm just donating. So let's try beating less people. So I had a little bit of moderate success there, and it just kind of snowballed where I just started becoming obsessed with kind of studying that and studying what these really good players are doing. What is CSU doing? What is Osmo doing? What is Empire Maker doing, et cetera, and figuring out how I can, use that to my advantage. They're playing the best plays, right? They're making optimal decisions, but I'm playing against them. I'm not trying to out project them. So once it's just kind of a snowball of, step by step, figuring out what worked best for me, and figuring out, that I'm playing a game against other people, and the best way for me personally to make money is playing against as few of those people, even if they're a little bit more, even if the lineups are a little bit more skillful. So, I've just spent the last few years really trying to spend as much time as I can studying those people and how to beat them just a couple times a year, right? I think I've had one good week out of 5 this year so far, which maybe isn't what I would hope for, but you get 17 shots at it and then some. So I'm really just trying to strategize around how to beat those guys 3 or 4 times a year, and you've had a great year.
Right. So your approach is like different from mine. Like I view, because it is the biggest factor, opponent strength, but you're sacrificing the skill edge to have a better win probability. So like your variance is going to be lower because you're playing smaller fields. Like I view it as, where are the dumbest people? Well, the dumbest people are in the large field, low stakes entries contest. Now, obviously on DraftKings, I'm past 1 million in lifetime entries, so I can't enter like the $1.20 max. I can't enter the quarter arcades, but that's where I started. So it's like it's not, I didn't just get money out of the blue. I started, that's how I learned how to play. But now, like, I take a look at and I analyze lineups in the play action $3 contest, the $9 slant, the milli even, like the really large field stuff, and I see essentially the rake is paid for me. Like that there is no, like there are enough lineups that have virtually zero win equity, either because they're constructed so poorly that like they have a hard time cashing. I mean, coming in the top 80th percentile of even like getting any money, or built where it's maximizing for that 80th percentile and they have virtually no shot at winning first place. So it's like all that, and we know in those large field contests, all the money's in the top spots. So like you're not going to min cash enough that you're profitable. So looking at those lineups, is more than 16% of the lineups in the contests those types of lineups. I find that it's more than 16%. So I view those contests, even at 16% rake, as more advantageous. It just takes a long time to realize that EV. Because,
right.
I've banked 4 of those types of large field GPPs over 5 years, because I also don't play 150 entries. I reduce my variance by doing that. I'm a nit. So like I do play large field GPPs, but I am a nit in how I play them. That I'm not going to invest, $1,500 into one contest with 150 lineups. I'll play 50, right? And I just use my best directions. I'm going to take a stand here. I'm going to find my correlation, find my leverage, and just do that over and over again. That's why you see in MLB, People will tweet me out whenever like the Marlins or the Tigers or the Pirates or someone scores 15 runs. They assume that I have some type of vomit stack, and that's the day that I win. I mean, like, but I'm just playing for those days. So, like my Roto Tracker graph is there's still going to be swings, but it'd be less so. But
Mhm.
you probably have more consistent returns, but you're paying less rake, but also
Yeah.
the field strength. You're not going to find 20% of the lineups in the spy or the power sweep as like you look at them and go like they're just throwing their money in the toilet.
Yeah, so it becomes a different game, right? Like, and I'm focusing even, wildcat, game changer, luxury bucks. I really am focusing like I really like the which I think Peter Overzet and Mike Leone and Joe Holka won a couple weeks ago. The game changer is a $1,500 single entry, like 160 lineups or something like that. It's just a really good contest. The payout structure is pretty good. The rake is great. So like contests like that, yeah, sure. Nobody wants to lose $1,500, but there's so few people that I'm playing against that the quote unquote edges become a little bit different, right? Yes, there's not 10% of those lineups that are just dead off the bat. There's a few. There's always a few.
Right, you always get you like just like in poker, you'll see a table of 8 like pros that know that they're
Yeah.
trading money amongst each other, and there's one or two seats open, and there'll be some guy coming out of the boxing match or something or the nightclub,
Yeah.
and that's basically a rich guy, like not someone. It's someone that there are people that play DFS that that they make a lot of money, and playing for $5 is not entertaining to them, so they want
Right.
to play for $1,500. So like I understand the Empire Maker $10,000 head to heads or whatever. Like he's the one picking those people up. He has to face the best competition weekly and daily to do that because
Hmm.
that marginal percentage edge that he may think he has over people. But I mean that's a viable way. There are plenty of professional poker players that you never heard of that make tons of money in private games. They're very good at the politics of poker in getting in the games with the big business owners and the celebrities. And they don't have to be the best players. That's why I always say that the opponent's strength is going to matter so much more than
Hmm.
anything else. And then how you play. I think this is where we're leading towards, because I
Yep.
know you've talked about it on Q Hunting, on Roto Grinders, because you're there. You do the premium showdown content and some of the NFL content. I'm obviously there. You'll play whatever you want and vomit stacks and do whatever. Uh, and how you play against people in the same way. I always bring it back to poker because I mean, that my entire teaching style is very similar to like the 2+2 books, David
Hmm.
Sklansky, Mason Malmuth. Like that's how I grew up playing poker in the early 2000s. That uh, how you're like it's almost like table image. How the other players perceive you and how you perceive the other players drastically affects your own strategy. When you play against bad players, like my strength in poker is playing against average players. That's my biggest strength. When you play against bad players in poker, there's no advanced strategy that could beat them. They're playing too many hands and taking them too far. So you beat them by the strength of you basically you're folding all your weakest hands and you're just value betting. So that's the similar in DFS to I'm just going to play the best projected lineup and let other people make mistakes. So that's in double ups where you're just like
Yep.
just give me the optimal lineup and let other people make the mistakes. Average
Yep.
players in poker have like the base knowledge. Like they understand the basic concepts, but I know that they understand the basic concepts, so I can exploit that. So it's like I'm gonna bet here, and they're gonna think I'm doing this as a continuation bet, but it's not. It's actually in the nuts, and like I'm
Hmm.
hoping they make a play at me because the bad player won't. The bad player will just go, I have a pair of threes, I call, and just keep and hope their hand is the best at the end. So I just have to value bet there. But the average player, like I know how the average player thinks. So I can exploit that. And then when you're dealing with other good players, now you're going to the third level. Now you're like, they know what I think they know and whatever. So now it's a battle of, well, I'm betting here and that he's thinking that you think it's this, but I'm gonna re-raise him here with like air, And if he calls, I'm just going to shove on the river, and hopefully a scare card comes up that he can't call me with second pay. Like, you can't do that against bad players. They just call too much. Like, you have to value bet, and like that's in DFS that would be like the projections. Do you have the best projections? Like, you could beat the worst players. You could probably beat average players that may look at projections but don't know how to build lineups very well to exploit, the floor and ceilings of projections. And then you get to the advanced level where, kind of in the contest that you play, that people almost out level themselves, where it's like, oh, I can't just play the best projected plays. Everyone knows the best projected plays, so everyone goes to the different direction. It turns out the best projected plays are under-owned.
It's we'll get into this week 5 slate was a really perfect example of that, where we've gotten that, we've known, like the play whoever you want type stuff, and things that I've been saying for a long time, like this is a game against other people. So, roster construction and game theory and all that was important. But people have been preaching that for a while. That's not new. And this concept isn't totally new. The good players knowing, this galaxy brain back and forth concepts between all the good players is not new, but it is definitely becoming bigger right now, I think, just because there is more information out there than ever before. It was always a contest, against these good players in these smaller fields where you're kind of galaxy braining each other, but the projections weren't as good. 3 years ago, projections just weren't as good. We didn't have as good of information. There was not, we didn't have air yards. We didn't have all this information that makes up, what people understand about a player or a slate or a team or whatever. So now even, the average person is smarter, which makes the experts absurdly smart. Right. We have slates where guys are airballing for multiple weeks in a row, and they're the most popular play on a slate.
Right. I remember, because I started playing in 2015, so I'm not totally old school. I hear some of the guys talk about 2010, 2011, where that. Just knowing who's injured in an NBA game, and how does that affect the team? That was the humongous edge, and now you have on-off tools, and it's built into projections, and we have injury reporting, everything. Everything's already calculated for you, kind of.
I mean, stacking. I mean, Beep on a Jeep. It wasn't that long ago that he discovered the correlation of stacking in baseball. Now it's who the hell makes a tournament team without what kind of idiot?
You should look at some of the teams in large field. There are plenty that don't.
True.
Because we see that, because a lot of times, I mean, I'll get in the Roto Grinders Discord of well, now everyone knows this, and I think a lot of times you think that we're in a bubble, because I'm part of the DraftKings player committee. Which is essentially a glorified focus group. We have no control over anything. We sign an NDA, but most of the stuff that we get told is is the wording on this screen good? I mean, would players understand this? And we go, sure, even though I think the feature sucks to begin with. They're not going to change. I mean, we have no control over that. But how few people in the grand scheme of things are in the serious player bubble, I guess. 95% of users are Joe Schmo on the couch putting together a lineup. I mean, especially in NFL. But even in MLB, even in showdown contests, 30% of the field may be the 150 max, whatever. But there's tons of single bullets and two lineups and all of that stuff out there that, they don't understand this stuff. There's still an edge in just that. It's just that now there are more people that understand it in that 30% range, that you have to compete against those. I mean, those are the people that have long-term profit, and there's only so much long-term profit in this game with the rate that there is. So to me, I don't view myself as what do I think Joe Schmo on the couch is going to do? I'm assuming that I'm going to beat that person more times than not already. Regardless, if I play the best plays, I could beat that guy. I could min cash, no problem. more times than not. Still not enough to be profitable, but I don't have to worry about those lineups. I have to worry about, okay, now there's the 30% of the field that there's a difference between me coming in 1.5xing and winning for $100,000. Those are the guys, those are the girls, the whoever that I'm looking to beat. And we see that that's where like everyone has access to projections. That's where everyone has access to content and tools and knowing correlations and knowing, leverage, knowing that like I actively look like on a slate, like you bring that example in like the luxury box or the large stakes, the smaller field stuff that we had this past week where like everyone for weeks has been just like you'd stack the Cowboys and their opponent, right? It's like the Cowboys defense is horrible. So like it doesn't matter if the Cowboys go up or down, they're playing too many plays, they have too many passing weapons. Everyone's going to play them. And throughout the course of the week, it's like, well, if everyone's going to play them, I'm going to play Zeke and I'm going to play someone else. And then you get 1 o'clock comes, you hit the ownership percentage, and Amari Cooper is 11% owned instead of 20, and then CeeDee Lamb is 6% owned instead of 12, and Dak is 8% owned instead of 16. Especially in those types of contests, in the lower stakes contests, the Cowboys' passing attack was at reasonable enough levels. It was actually under-owned compared to what people expected, but I mean the Zeke ownership drew that, and to exploit it by you essentially went with the first look take. Salaries come out, and it's like, well, I'm the best player. Cowboys stat 3+1. Run it back with Slayton. Like that seemed like you play Dak, you play Cooper, and you play one of another receiver, Schultz or whatever, and then you run it back with Slayton or Engram, depending, and that's going to be the chalk, and it wasn't, and so you next level, and you go, well, everyone thinks everyone's going to play it. I'm just going to play it, right? I'm just going to do it.
It's a perfect example of, and I think, like I said, I don't have like regrets about my teams, but I think I thought that like, in the middle of last week, I'm consuming content too, right? And I'm,
but we're consuming content. I always explain that I'm not consuming content because I want to hear people's opinions. I want to consume content because I know other people listen to those opinions.
Exactly. And I want to know what information everybody else knows, and they're all listening to that, right? So, and they're all, I mean, much respect to all these people. I value their opinions too. Evan Silva and
they're
Rich Rebar
saying the
and
best.
whatever.
Okay, let me get this straight. When you hear content and see stuff and read articles, people are typically talking about the high probability plays, the highest probability plays. But the difference in probabilities between the highest plays and the fourth highest plays is usually not that great. You're talking about 1 percentage point here or there. The difference between the lock of all locks and the eighth guy that's going to be 3% owned is it's big enough that you'd rather play the other guy, but like it's not so dramatic that one guy should be 34% owned and the other guy is 2% owned. So like that's the game theory of DFS. So it's not, but for a general public, like why wouldn't you discuss the projections say that they're underpriced, that everything lines up for them to have the highest probability, but their probability of like ceiling a high probability is 40% to hit a GPP winning ceiling for Mike Davis to hit 30 plus points. Like that's a 40, it's not 90%. So like, I don't blame the content for that. Cause I could look, It's the same thing as looking at the projections. Like what are people supposed to talk about? Like, okay, who are we targeting this week? I don't know, the 12th best wide receiver and the 18th best tight end. Like, that's what type of content is that? It's like all you have to know is the probabilities. Now you have to make your lineups, and it has to depend on the contest that you're in. You're playing, Eric, your lineups. I would probably look at for me playing the $9 slant and go, like, you ain't winning this. Like you're way too straightforward. Like you don't have enough leverage for that contest. And then sometimes you may look at a lineup that I put in the SPY and go, Jesus, why did you have to go that far? Like, did you have to play 2% Marvin Jones? And like if that's the way that I sometimes tilt in the other direction since I'm doing large field stuff. I level, and then I out level, and then I go, well, if I'm gonna now play this off the board stack, I also can't play the chalk one off. And then all of a sudden I look at my lineup and I'm like maybe I didn't need to be contrarian that much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's funny you say like, what are the content creators supposed to talk about? Like, of course they're going to tell you like just what everybody else sees. Oh, the Dallas passing game is not sustainable. You got to play Zeke. Like, and then you're like, well, what kind of content is you're playing the 12th best wide receiver? I'm like, well, that's my fucking content. That literally, if you read or watch what I'm saying, I'm like, yeah, Antonio Gibson projects as like the 20th best running back, but he's my favorite. He's probably my favorite play this week.
Right, but you're doing it in comparison to ownership. It's not exactly. You don't think he's going to be the highest scoring running back. You don't think he's even. You don't even think he's going to be the highest scoring from a median perspective, point per dollar. It's just that, does he have a high enough chance at a ceiling for his price, which at $5K is probably 20 points, 20-ish points, compared to how he'll be owned? Is he going to be, if he's going to be 8% owned versus is he going to be 18%? Because if he was going to be 18% owned, to me, I wouldn't be looking at him as much.
Yeah.
Right. So really but how do you do content that way? I mean, that's what I try to do on the ASA show and Roto Grinders. That's what you try to do on the shows that you do at Roto Grinders, where like I'm not giving you the best plays. I'm just looking at here are potential places to exploit, and there could be 40 of them. You can't play all 40 of them. You have to decide which ways you're going to go. But I'm at least giving you, here are my thought process, and here are the ways that I'm thinking of going. Feel free to pick and choose whatever you want. But I'm not trying to predict the outcomes. Like, you're not predicting that Antonio Gibson is going to put up 20 points on this slate. You just say his probability based on these projections and his matchup and everything is that he's going to hit a ceiling 18% of the time, and he's going to be owned 9%. So, especially if I'm paying up for an expensive stack that other people are not.
Yep.
Right, because people were paying down at wide receiver. So it's like, okay, how do I get Hopkins into my lineup? How do I get Ridley into my lineup? How do I get a 7K wide receiver? Well, I'm going to need a cheap running back. So Antonio Gibson makes sense in those lineups. But in a vacuum, going on a show and go, Antonio Gibson, not a very good play, but except for these types of lineups. Typically the audience doesn't get that. Right. So it's for a general public, you're talking about the stuff that, here are the highest probability plays. And then you have to make the decision about which ways you're going to fade, how are you going to find leverage. So just knowing that, and I tell people that don't even play cash games, that if you're good at cash games, you're probably going to be good at GPPs because you could identify, the first skill in DFS is identifying the arbitrage between the salary and their value, which is the underpriced players, which tend to be the chalkier players because they project for more points than what they're worth. And then you make a good lineup construction. Then you look at the lineup construction and go, a lot of people are going to do this type of lineup construction. And now you know how to get contrarian. So if you don't even have that base knowledge, I think the content is great because the content will point you towards that. But the problem is that 90% of people listening to the content are playing GPPs. So like it's I'm going to put together my Olamide Zacchaeus lineup and Zeke, CH, and Davis and the Browns defense, and then like why didn't I win the Millie? It's like, well, you're not going to win the Millie with that lineup.
Yep. So that's you talk about like the contest that I'm playing, and I think it's interesting. You and I talking because we have the same approach, generally speaking, but have to go about it in very different ways. Right.
So how do you go about it differently than me?
Well, you mentioned, sometimes you might look at my team and be like, for the 10,000 person or God, for 100,000 person contest that you're playing in, like it's not even really a lineup worth playing because I'm not getting I don't have to go to your vomit stacks, right? Sometimes I still will because I like to get.
But the approach is the same. It's just that the amount of correlation and leverage. Like I look at it and go, like this is not enough leverage for this, but it's enough leverage for a 200-person contest. I mean, that's perfectly fine. You just have to find in the smaller field stuff, like one primary like leverage point of like one negative correlation that you're going to go against and get leverage from, and then a lot of times you're playing the best plays, and like that's it.
Yeah.
Like that's all you need to do. But that's why I look at your lineup, because for the large field stuff, you have to do that and then go into other different directions. You have to like, okay, I did that, and then now I have to find another negative correlation, and then I have to correlate them to the lower owned receiver on the other side, because that's going to be too chalky. And then now you look at the lineup and you're like, okay, now I can come in first place out of 300,000 entries.
But that's the thing. Like we were kind of talking about it, before I think before we even hopped on here. But like, I don't have to go completely crazy off the board, but there's something different about every slate that you have to do, right? And it's all contests, but I think in the higher, like say smaller field, higher stakes, it's so drastic. So like I have the luxury box from last week pulled up, right? CE8, there's like multiple like 50% owned players, and in the Millie Maker, I guess I can pull that up really quick just to kind of see what
you're saying what I say all the time, that the ownership in the smaller field condenses more, which makes it easier for you to find leverage.
Exactly. So I'm focused on that leverage, but that leverage is different on every single slate. It's not just, so week 2, Davante Adams was that 50% owned guy, right? And sure, yeah, he got hurt, whatever. We can debate the merits of all that shit. But Aaron Jones was 15%. Because of slate dynamics, because there were other chalk running backs, and because Davante Adams was chalk, Aaron Jones provided this like you dream up a leverage spot like that, right? So you do that, and then you don't stack the stone chalk, you stack the second or third best, and in the 200-man field, you have a dream good. GPP line.
Right, you're good, right?
Like, you don't have to play Hunter Renfro you don't have to do this. You don't have to. Oh well, I got to play Kelsey over Kittle, and then I got to play Renfro. You don't have to do all that, right? So it's about identifying that kind of stuff and then constructing your lineup appropriately. But all that changes every week. So like in my opinion, in week 5, how I broke down the slate, there was not like Aaron Jones did not exist. Right. So week 2, there was just like one or two play Aaron Jones and play, to me, it was like Miles Sanders, like play these guys who are just as good plays as the chalk expensive running backs. And then, like you said, play whoever you want, and then play whoever you want. Last week, it was a very different situation. We had this whole Cowboys shit that
right. But we also had the Panthers shit as well. Like I took a look at this. This is how I viewed it. That like I mentioned it before, like finding negative correlations. Like you find extra relative. Like we talk about this in the MASTERCLASS, the importance of relative value. You're not trying to score the most points. You're trying to score more points than your opponents. So like in your example with Aaron Jones, if Davante Adams is chalk, then every point that Adams gets is points that Jones can't get because they're both on the same team. But if Adams is chalk, like if you see here, he's chalk and like this. So every point, if you take Jones over Adams, like the 50% of lineups with Adams, every point that Jones you're gaining so many more points over relatively to those Adams lineups because Adams isn't getting those points. It's coming out of them. So on this slate in week 5, you take a look and you go, well, I think the Dallas passing game is going to be chalky. So I'll play the running game. But no, Zeke's 40% owned. So like, so you don't get what I gain by doing that. And then you look at the Panthers and you go, Mike Davis is going to be the chalkiest running back on the slate. And you go, well, I'll play the passing attack. Well, Robbie Anderson's the chalkiest wide receiver. Like, okay, well, I can't do that. So that's why I moved to the third game and I go, CEH is going to be 30% owned. And like, I look at my projections and I see like Hill and Kelsey with high ceiling probabilities, especially at their price tags. And it's not like the Chiefs were going to be unowned. Yeah. But I still think at their levels, they were going to be underowned only because of CEH's ownership. I think the more owned CEH was, the less owned Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, Watkins were going to be. So like, that was my major stand of like, I was most exposed to Chiefs, Raiders. And then I also noticed that none of the Raiders were getting ownership.
Right.
So I'm now I can play a 3+1, a 2+1, and Ruggs was 1.5% owned in the large field stuff, and
Right.
like he was in 8. I mean, I played 20 Chiefs lineups. Like he was in 8 out of the 20. I had Jacobs 5, I had Waller 7, like something like that. Yeah. Waller was owned, but like that combination now, if CEH doesn't do well, like we saw it this past week, like CEH was busted for his price. Those stacks didn't get there. I didn't have the right pieces in or whatever. But like you think in the same way that I played a Mahomes stack in one of the single entry type of line. I mean, but in those lineups, I could play Mike Davis. I could play Robbie Anderson. In the single entry contests. In the large field, who knows who knows what correlations I'm making there. But that's exactly what you're doing. But every slate is different in finding those best turns. Like in this past slate, if you stack the Steelers, Eagles, the lowest total game, and it went off. Now, how about the people that stacked that game and said, I'm going to go off the board. I'm going to take the lowest total game. I'm going to play Ben Roethlisberger. I'm going to play Miles Sanders, who broke off a big run, and that was his only good play. I'm going to play a 3+1 with Miles Sanders in the running back spot. I'm going to stack Ben Roethlisberger, Ben and Deontay Johnson and Eric Ebron. Like, you lost because you didn't have Chase Claypool there, and you didn't run it back with Travis Fulgham. So, I mean, like...
Yeah, even though you were right. You absolutely nailed the nuts at no ownership. You were right.
The game that went over, that no one expected to go over, you got right, and you have a horrible lineup.
Yeah. But I think the Chiefs thing is a good point that, that's where I ended up landing too. I kept going back and forth. So I only played 2 teams. I usually play 2 to 5 teams. I played 2 teams last week, and I landed on a Chiefs stack and the Texans game stack. But pretty much all week I was on that same logic that you have the Chiefs. Well,
but other people were also, Eric. I mean, like we saw, like I noticed some sharper players, come Friday and Saturday, that this Chiefs ownership is coming up a little bit more, right? This Cowboys passing game is actually going down.
Exactly. So that's what I kept wrestling with, and that's what we were kind of talking about it before the show and saving it for this, and that's where this is getting really interesting, I think. Because that was my take, like all throughout the week, and I'm trying not to do too much tinkering and shit on the weekends when it's a little, you're trying to process the new information without overreacting. So, my stance was exactly what you said. The CEH is going to be super popular, and these, expensive. I know Zeke and Mike Davis are not like super expensive, but these a little bit higher priced, chalkier running backs, Kareem Hunt too, are going to be more owned. People are playing CEH, so they're not going to play this Chiefs game. So, okay, I'm going to play Mahomes and Tyreek and whatever. Yeah, Waller, Ruggs, Kelsey, however you want to break it down. Sammy Watkins was another, I think, awesome leverage opportunity within that game, being at the same price range as Darius Slayton, and then above Zacchaeus. He's just a cheap wide receiver that correlates perfectly with your team and offers you leverage off of another chalky play in that position. So all these factors start coming together, and I'm like, okay, this is it. This is how I'm going to attack this slate. And then, 2 years ago, I would have never thought about it again. We would have stacked the Chiefs and made all the money. Then, the weekend starts to come around, and I'm like, no one is going to play the Dallas passing game. You came into the week, and that's all.
Literally every podcast. I listened to 20 shows. And it's literally they've run 60 plays. It's the whole, which is correct. Everyone is correct. The Giants aren't going to be, the Giants offense sucks. They're not going to be able to keep up, that type of thing. And typically we'd see 2 years ago, recency bias, people just jump. I mean, we still do see that on occasion on certain players. I mean, we had certain weeks last year that Mark Ingram was 20% for no apparent reason. Right, he had 3 touchdowns in one game, and then all of a sudden, for the next 3 weeks, I'm looking at the Millie ownership, and why is he still 16% owned? He's getting 40% of the work. But these Look at last year. Perfect example was like Will Fuller did nothing, and then he was chalk, and then put up 50+ points as chalk after literally doing nothing, like just burning money for everyone.
Yep.
But it depends on the contest that you're in. I think Brandon Cooks was that example this past week. That in the lower stakes, I noticed looking at ownership that a lot of people got off of him. But in the higher in the higher stake stuff, people like his 40. His price is even low. It's a better spot than the week before, and his price is now 300 less. So what has really changed? Bill O'Brien's not there. I don't know if that makes a difference, but like, how do you not load up on Brandon Cooks? And they did and got rewarded for it. But you see that more. The biases don't affect the higher stakes more so than the lower stakes because Brandon Cooks, if you listen to content, like he was there, but not like pumped or anything. Like, and he projected okay. It's not like he even popped in projections like to that extent. It was a good play in projection point per dollar, but not like compared to Slayton, compared to Zacchaeus, compared like Robbie Anderson, like that was going to be kind of the chalk. But you notice in the higher stakes contests, like those bias effects really don't. They don't have. I mean, maybe Adam Troutman.
15%.
Maybe Adam Troutman is the.
That's where we draw the line.
Right. Well, sometimes it happens. That it's like for lineup construction purposes, that's why I say it's important to study the sharp players, not the winning people of a certain week.
Yeah.
Because like last week, a lot of sharp players got killed. Of course, I didn't play Adam Troutman because I thought like I'm just taking my points with Waller and good luck trying to beat me. But but like I said, I'm a mid stakes player. I would classify myself as a mid stakes player, and I have vast experiences at the low stakes. So a lot of times, and because I'm a nit, a lot of times I lean a lot more towards floor than ceiling. So like I'm just gonna say I'm gonna play Waller and you run me down. I think Adam Levitan calls it a prove it week. Of a like I'm just gonna get my 15 points at tight end. You go down to Troutman. And if Lockett beats me, then he beats me. No, fine. If he beats me, he beats me. But I'm not gonna take a 0 at tight end. You take the 0 and try to run me down. But I understand. But it's not like it was a bad play. I understood, especially because I even said on shows that if you're not gonna play Wally, you might as well just go all the way down to Troutman because no tight end is worth a fuck. So like I get that, but playing at the higher stakes and the smaller field contests. There's a lot that's where that third level comes in that doesn't necessarily exist at the lower stakes.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming even more apparent that third level. There's always been the let's call it the two levels at in these contests and to a lesser extent in lower stakes, just as more content and more information and stuff has gotten out there. Like you said, there's always the bad players and stuff. But now that 30% that's good in those contests that you're playing against, they are better at all this and galaxy braining shit. But it just so happens that, in these higher stakes, smaller field, that's the whole field. There is the
right. You're getting just those 30% in the right. You may have some 5 schmucks in the bottom. Out of 200 players, you may have like 5 or 6 lineups that are like, Jesus, I don't know how they put these together, but like that doesn't represent that much of the field.
Right. Like there's 400 or basically 400 people. And last week, like basically everybody scored at least like 120, like just about everybody, and 200 won it. So there isn't even that big of a gap from the shitty lineups in this contest to the winning lineup. Top 10 was 190 and like last place is like, not that far behind. When you look at the Millie, there's teams with 30 fucking points, like it's a different game. So this third level, this galaxy brain stuff we keep talking about has become even more important. We both know it's always been important, and this next level thinking and ownership and leverage and all that. Everyone understands that, but I think it is evolving a little bit how leverage presents itself and how game theory is played out in contests like this has evolved, a little bit. Even these guys are, the sharpest players that exist. Even them, even last year, maybe. I'm not so certain that Brandon Cooks is one of the highest owned wide receivers off of the bagel last year at,
Or even
crazy ownership
Ridley.
that
I
he
mean,
was.
Ridley had
Yeah.
the island game with the bagel, and he ends up with 16% ownership. A lot of
Yeah. I
times
think there's,
that wouldn't happen. A lot of times
yeah, I
he
think,
would be owned, but it's like, and but you have to admit, you also get the over, even with sharp players, of the Olamide Zacchaeus, where you take a
yes.
look and you go, like, obviously projects well, but this is going to be a wide range of outcomes. He's the third receiver. He doesn't there's not data to support this. And I've
Yeah.
said on shows before that just because you saw them do well last week when the injury happened doesn't mean they game plan a certain way the following week. So I'm looking at Zacchaeus going, like, Zacchaeus is going to be 25% owned, and Jeff Smith is going to be 5% owned. Like, is one guy more, like, he's another 3K guy. He ended up getting like double digit targets, just only 3 catches because Joe
Yeah.
Flacco sucks. But
Right.
right, but I look at Isaiah Wright on Washington. I go, is there, how he's less than 1% owned? Is that any different than Olamide
Hmm.
Zacchaeus? But then you also think in terms of, well, instead of playing the lineup that someone else would have played with Zacchaeus, and then you put Jeff Smith there, just play a lineup that doesn't have a 3K wide receiver. And especially
Hmm.
in these single entry tournaments, like Zacchaeus came in and like a third of the lineups had him in. So that means a third of lineups had a 3K wide receiver, which means that led them, and more than 70% have Mike Davis in the lineup. So now you could start plugging in if you want to, like, back construct what a lot of the field's lineups are going to look like. Start
Hmm.
locking these players in and then running 100 lineups in an optimizer, and with some correlations, because you're going to put in 3+1, 2+1, and then you could start seeing that, okay, like, who's going to be unowned? You're going to look and you see DeAndre Hopkins only shows up in 4 lineups, and you go, and you go, okay, what
Hmm.
happens if I do Kyler Murray and Hopkins and Crowder? Because I did that in one single entry lineup, and
Yep.
and I don't have to play Zacchaeus at all. I play Brandon Cooks in that lineup as a one-off, because I don't think he's going to be owned enough where the stack doesn't go off. Watson's going to be popular, but the Cooks could get there at 4,100 and be the only guy. So
Hmm.
so that's how you could reconstruct what lineups look like and go, well, instead of just plugging in Zacchaeus and Davis and then trying to build a lineup there, you could say, well, what if I just don't play a 3K wide receiver? Like, that's automatically, your lineup construction will be different than a third of the field. Even if you're playing chalky players, like, you're gaining leverage on 33% of the field just right off the bat by just not playing him, and your construction will be different.
And I think that's been, you have to have all these tools in your toolkit, right? Not to get like super cliche or whatever, but you have to be able to assess the slate and break everyone down appropriately. Sometimes it is play Jeff Smith over, we don't have CMC and Saquon and all these guys anymore, so it's a little bit different, and we barely have expensive wide receivers anymore too. There's so many goddamn injuries that we have like nobody to pay up for. So there's these variables that you have to assess. But I think, a lot of people think about it, and I do too sometimes, how you defined it the first way. Okay, Zacchaeus is 3K. There's definitely other punt wide receivers that I can play at the same price, and now it's just bam, okay, let's play those probability games. And I think that makes sense. But where I think is getting, now dogs like this.
He's
We got
tilting. He's tilting.
Yeah. Tilting. I lost on a week when Zacchaeus was 40. He's 40% in the luxury box, and I didn't win. That's just
Right.
that's
He
bad.
faded a guy that only put up 2.3 points at 3K and lost.
Yeah, exactly. And I played. We played Tyreek, and he catches an 80-yard touchdown on the first play, and it gets called back, and then the Chiefs, can barely score. That was
Watkins' injury. That would kill me. I had him in like a third of my lineups.
Yep.
Please
Watkins.
come back out for the second half. But then you get to the point. This is how you rationalize in your head. You during halftime, you're like, please, I'm going to check Twitter. Please say that Watkins is not just downgraded to out. And then you come to like kind of the realization that like he's not coming back. And then now you start thinking the opposite direction of like, well, I'm glad he got 10 points. I'm glad he got that touchdown. So 10 points for Watkins ain't bad in my stacks. Maybe I can win with that, right?
Right.
Maybe you start rationalizing, and then in the back of your head, a 10-point wide receiver in a stack. You ain't not in a large field contest. You ain't winning stuff. So I'm like, I got Ruggs at 1% in that lineup. Maybe it could happen. Maybe, and then Chase Claypool ruins all your dreams because even at 1% own, like I ain't winning some large field stuff without him in my lineup.
Yeah, it's funny, but I think the like I said, you just have to be able to break down the slate. But what has become a lot more interesting to me, and I talked a lot about it last week, is exactly what we broke down with like the Chiefs. Okay, everybody is playing this 3K wide receiver, and what you broke down with kind of the optimizer type thing. Plug in the best, the quote unquote best plays, and then see what that spits out because you see how all your opponents are going to be building. So sure, you can build the same way and play pivots. That's definitely effective. But given the fact that we don't have CMC, we don't have, we don't have Michael Thomas, we don't have Lamar is worthless at quarterback, basically. We don't have 10K guys to be jamming into our teams. Everybody is muddied in the middle, all the plays. So there's more power to me in just flipping the script. Okay, everybody's going to play Zacchaeus and Zeke and CEH and whatever, Deshaun and the Robbie, right? Okay, so they only have so much money left, and they're paying up at tight end. So it's like, okay, that's exactly how everybody is going to build. So I'll just play David Johnson. He's he wasn't low owned, but like I'll just play David Johnson and Antonio Gibson or Devonta Freeman. I don't care. The name doesn't matter. Pick whichever cheaper guy, one small tier at running back cheaper, and then play Tyreek, Ridley, Nuke, Amari, whoever, whatever you want there, and you have just as much upside. Your plays are just you're not just having to depend on this 1v1 leverage point. You're playing just as many good plays with just as much upside. And now you have like basically this entire unique lineup, and you didn't even set out to you didn't have to seek out low ownership. You just built a little bit differently.
Right. I mean, because if you compared the lineups even from a median projection standpoint, the difference between your lineups and those lineups is maybe 2 or 3 points.
Exactly.
Which from a median perspective, for a min cash perspective, may matter, but from a ceiling perspective, on a one game sample size, right? On a 1 game sample size, I'll take a 2 or 3 median hit if I'm gaining so much relative value. I mean, like I bang it over a head of like if you're playing a lineup that I'm going to go by cumulative ownership, which is not necessarily the be all end all, but let's say you have a lineup with a cumulative ownership of 130%. Right, which is about the range of what you maybe should be looking for in single entry type of stuff, 120, 130, that type of range, maybe 140, depends. Obviously, this is because if you play a 1% owned guy with all the chalk, I mean, it could end up being a high number, but still enough leverage. If you're playing a lineup with let's say 140% cumulative ownership and a median projection of X, and then instead you play a different lineup that has a median projection that's 2 points less, but a cumulative ownership of 95%. Like the ceilings of that lineup is gaining so much more relative value because it's 45%. I mean, it's like the ownership on that, and you're only giving up 2 or 3 points in median. Like if you're giving up 20 points in median, okay, maybe you're
right.
You're good. You're playing way too many low probability players and not the higher probability players. But if you're only giving up, 2, 3 points, 5 points even on median, there's not necessarily ceiling. I mean, if your ceiling probability is the difference, if your whole lineup ceiling probability, let's say the first lineup was in combination of like 18%. In aggregate, because you'll have some 38% guys and then some like 9% guys. It'll work out that way. So let's say the total lineups is like 18-ish%, and then this other one is like 15%. But it doesn't have the high end range. It just has a lot of the guys kind of in the middle, and you're giving up a couple of points in median, but it's going to be like half his own. Like that's technically this. Like in content, how do you do this? How do you say that that's the best? Like I said it on Twitter. Like, what exactly are the best plays? Because to me, what we're talking about here is like it's fading Robbie Anderson and playing DJ Moore. Like that in a vacuum, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson at 23% owned versus DJ Moore 12% owned. DJ Moore is the best play. Robbie Anderson is the higher probability play. He projects better. But in just in that vacuum, who is the best play? So when people ask who are the best plays, like what are the best? Like, are you talking about what's the highest probability? Mike Davis is the best running back play. But in certain lineups, he may not be the best play for that lineup. So like just playing the best plays is not, especially in the contest that you're playing, and especially in large field contests where you just can't play stone chalk. Like it's not good enough anymore. You're not getting, there's not enough dead lineups. These contests are big, or you're playing against other smart people like you do, that you can't just play in a vacuum on paper best play. They're not the best. They're literally not I wouldn't describe them as the best plays. I would say, I would look at a lineup that someone would build and go, I'm going to be playing the SPY 4,000 entry, and they look, and it's nearly a 2v2 on my cash lineup. Like, it's a cash lineup that I would consider even playing in double ups. And I look at it and go, this is a horrible lineup. But I'm playing the best plays. It's like, no, this is not the best lineup for this contest. You have to, it's like, why would I play why would I fade Zeke and play Cooper instead? I said, because that would be the best play. It's like, yeah, but Zeke projects better than Cooper. Yeah, but no. Cooper at 11% owned versus Zeke at 40% owned is a negative correlation for the contest you're in is the best play. But in a vacuum, you can't, that's the concept. That's what the course is all about, of like, knowing the concepts and then having to apply. Like we're talking about this past slate because we're applying those concepts to the past slate. And then the slate coming up, which currently doesn't even have pricing yet. And in FanDuel, who knows if it even gets scored yet. Like you don't know what that's going to be. Like you don't know. We have some slates where there's so many underpriced players that it becomes almost too easy to make like median lineups. And then we have slates where the pricing is so sharp that it's like, you could make any lineup you want. Everything seems about equal to me. Like no one becomes chalky because like there's like, you could play one of these 6 guys or one of these 4 guys. And I guess we're all punting with this $3,800 guy, and that guy ends up becoming chalk. And that's where you get your leverage. You're like, we see that in NBA. Like in NBA, if there's if there's no injuries and the pricing is good, like this, it doesn't happen. I'm using this example because it happened 2 years ago, whatever. That like Jamal Crawford off the bench for the Timberwolves, like he was always like Jordan Clarkson is a similar way. Like the high usage 6-man that only plays 22 minutes, like is always under 4K. And then it's like there's no value on the slate. So it's like all of a sudden, like Jordan Clarkson's 32% owned, or Crawford, because no one else could find value in order to play like the better plays and everything. And that there you'd find leverage. But that's unique to that type of slate. And since every slate is different, understanding the concepts is more important. So you could apply it to the contests that you're in. And then even applying the concepts, you could fly, like we talked about the leveraging CEH and the Chiefs stack, but like there were plenty of other ways to go. I mean, if you played that Bridgewater lineup and you played Curtis Samuel in your stack, right, and you ran that back with Gage, like that applied you applied the same exact concept. Like that was if I saw a lineup like that, I would be like, okay, I understand why you're doing this, right? If I see a Ryan, Ridley, Zacchaeus, Davis lineup, and then I see like someone like Miles Sanders in the running back spot and run back with Deontay Johnson, I'm like, okay, Sanders is going to be much lower owned because of the matchup. It's like, okay, you have a chalky stack, but now I get why you're playing Miles Sanders in this lineup. And then I get why you're playing Deontay Johnson because that's the secondary correlation. Like, you know how many options you have for a slate doing that on a 10-game slate? I mean, imagine a 12 or 13-game slate. There's like 50, there's so many different directions that are viable that like I can look at and go, I understand. I didn't do that, but I understand why I still think this is a plus EV lineup. I just chose to. I'm choosing to double down on these other directions to make sure I get that right, because I think that's slightly more plus EV, and I just want as many of those combinations as possible.
Exactly. Like everybody, at the end of the day, everybody has to make their own decisions, right? Like you said, there's 10, 12, 13, whatever games. It doesn't really matter if we agree on a, all the plays and exactly how all those games will play. That's why the picks thing and the just give me the best plays type thing is so popular, is because people don't want to, either don't feel comfortable, they don't feel like they have enough knowledge, whatever, so they get fed these best plays, when in reality, as you described it, the best plays are different for every slate, for every lineup you play. For, like you said, Mike Davis could be the absolute best play in one lineup that you play, and the absolute worst play in another lineup that you play. But it's up to you to make those decisions around it and build, like you said, plus EV teams. And people don't, you and I would come off as an asshole when somebody's like, "Hey, I got this 2v2." I'm like, well, that
doesn't do me any good. I need to know the rest of your lineup.
Yeah,
I need to know what contest you're. GPP. That's still not good enough for me.
Yeah.
What type of GPP? I mean,
right.
If you double ups, yes, because double ups, it really condenses the amount of players that you can play, because you're really aiming for median. So if I see a 2v2 and they say double ups, and I see one side is two guys that I have in my lineup and two guys that I wouldn't even possibly considered, because a lot of times even then I'll see a 2v2. And it's four guys that I never considered for cash games at all, and I just say start over. I'm like, what? However you got to those players, like, or when people say last piece, like what? My default answer is like, if you need a default, it's play whoever fits in that slot that's more correlated with your lineup, or if you need leverage, lower owned, and if you don't need leverage, higher owned. But until you show me the lineup of the contest it's in, I really can't give you an accurate answer. All I could do is give you who's the highest projected point per dollar player. But I mean, you could look at the projections and see that. I mean, assuming if you're asking me in like Roto Grinders Premium Discord, like you could see the same thing that I'm looking at. So like sort by point per dollar and the price, and that's the guy I'm going to tell you, because I don't have any other context to go by.
And I think, like we kind of started off talking about, in general, the field and overall player population is getting smarter about these kinds of things. And that's why we're sitting here talking about, how to construct your lineups and how deep to think about it in relation to the past slate, and how you can apply it moving forward, because the field is getting smarter and the game is evolving. But even for myself, I have to take a step back sometimes. Like I talked about it last week, that, sometimes you just get in this content grind and you're grinding every single day and you're making teams in different sports every single day. And sometimes you just lose track of it. And the next thing you know, this happened to me literally 2 weeks ago. The next thing, the slate locks at noon on a Sunday, and I look at my team and I think that it's leveraged, and I think, I made a good team, and the whole fucking thing is chalk. Like it's literally what happened to me 2 weeks ago. So it's easy to get caught up in that grind, and, have just having this kind of, platform that we have here will help me, and like maybe there's some people that can draw some things from it, because you have to think about it so deeply on every single slate, because it's so different. We just outlined multiple things that you could have done this past week that gave you leverage, but then there's also examples from week 2, week 3 that were different ways for you to get leverage. And then this coming slate, which God, like you said, God knows if we'll even if we'll get one, but I don't know. I have no idea what the leverage is going to, I don't know what the best plays are on that one. So it's just constantly kind of reminding yourself of all these different things while resetting, like, okay, got it. Understand, where I went wrong, where I went right, where was maybe like we talked about the Cowboys thing. You and I kind of agreed that like this Chiefs concept was, probably the best path to, leveraging yourself and giving you the best path to win a tournament. But like, if someone wanted to come to me and be like, dude, Dak was sub 10% and Gallup was like 4% and CD was 5%, that was the best play. I wouldn't argue with you.
I had some of those lineups.
Yeah, that's a great, that was a phenomenal play, leveraging this galaxy brain third level thinking stuff that's going on in these contests. So, just every week you have to be cognizant of all of that I don't think, it's stuff that I don't think you had to be quite as cognizant of in the past.
Right. And sometimes they go wrong. Like I played some Minshew stacks because the Texan stack was going to be popular. Like, let me just play Minshew, Chark, and LaVisca or something, or Eifert, and do it 3+1 the other way with David Johnson. And I'm like, that made sense leverage wise of like, okay, Watson fails. David Johnson has the big game. So that means if Watson fails, Cooks fails, and Fuller fails, and David Johnson goes nuts and Minshew has to throw the ball to come back, like that type of game, like those lineups failed. I mean, like those lineups did not cash. But the process in getting to those lineups were the same process of getting to the Chiefs lineups or getting to the Cowboys line. I mean, it's the exact same thing. How can I exploit what my opponents are doing and make good enough lineups that have high enough medians that the difference between the lineups is not great enough in comparison to the range of their ownership? And go, Minshew's 4%, LaVisca's 7%, Chark is 9%. And then, you have Fuller at 18% and Watson at 22%. I'm like, let me try it this way. But the difference between me and you is, like, I like playing them all. That's the hard part for me. It's like, I'll just build 100 lineups because I can play 6 Dak lineups. I'll play 6 Minshew. Like, I'll find all the directions that I want to go, and then I have the option to like maybe one of these Bink. I'll just play one of them. You're playing like, I got one lineup in a live final qualifier. It's like you can't play 10 of them. You have to, and if you're going to do it, and it could be off by one receiver. Like you're going, okay, I'm going to go for the Chiefs thing, and then you're going to run it back with Waller. And it turns out it's like, oh, if I ran it back with Ruggs, I would have won. I mean, me, I don't have to worry about it as much because like I have both lineups in the $9 slant. So like either one. Like, it's one of those things and then when I have to build my single entry type of lineups, that's when it's like, okay, what is my best? What is the one? Like, should I play the Dak? Okay, I'm going to play the Dak one in the single entry. And then like in the 150 power slate, I'm doing the Mahomes one. But I ran it back with Waller and not Ruggs. And I'm like, oh no, I didn't. But my slant lineup is good. Like that's the thing that I'm not used to. I mean, I get it. I mean, that's what everyone that plays single entry 3 max has to do. Of like, I have like 8 thoughts in my head, but I can only play one of them. And you have to choose your best one. And some people are good at like, this is what I'm going to do. And they're very decisive on that. When you're so used to playing, 20 maxes and 50 lineups in a contest, it's like, I could just look at my best directions and go, okay, let's just kind of like, I know some of these lineups are burning. I'm playing 100 lineups. I know 80 and they're going down with the ship. Like it's kind of like sperm reaching the egg. It's like I need one of them to get there. Can I get one of them to get there, and then I'm good, and then I win a lot of money. So like I go for that. So maybe throughout the course of these weeks that we do the podcast, that you kind of help me on like finding like this is kind of weird. You have to tell me what the best plays are because like right, you understand, like not the high probability plays of like, okay, I've the leverage points, I've itemized it, I've gotten it down to 10. It's like I've gotten 10 leverage points and I'm going to exploit it in large field, and you have to tell me what's the best leverage. But now I need to know what the best one of that is. And I'm like, but
it's funny because you're like, that's literally what I'm doing though. You know what I mean? Like every single week, that's what you're identifying all these 10, 15, 20, whatever, how many ever leverage points there are on a slate. There's tons, but you're identifying your favorite 10 or whatever. I'm identifying my favorite 2, and jamming them into one or 2 teams, So that is what I'm doing. And like, there's no right or wrong or whatever, but it helps me be like reminding myself, you don't have to be perfect. Like, I'm not, in the slant, maybe you don't have to be perfect, quite as perfect as say the Millie or whatever. But like, in these 200-man fields, like you were talking about the live final queue, like some of those are like 60 something people. I don't have to be perfect. It's like, yeah, sure, I'm pissed at myself when I play Waller over Ruggs as the bring back. Sure. Like, okay, that sucks. But like, I don't need to score 250 points. And if I'm appropriately leveraging myself, and leveraging the field, the the winning score, I want to win the lower scoring slate anyway, right? I don't want to win the slate that I have to be perfect. I don't want to win the slate that I
Right.
got to have Ruggs and Claypool, and Miles Sanders. I don't want to win those slates because I'm just never going to win them.
Right, because
So
typically the top players, even in large field GPPs, you'll notice that on low scoring slates, that's when the sharp players are towards the top. The high scoring slates isn't, because the high scoring slates, and I say this to people in the Roto Grinders Discord, is like you're gonna play those 6 chalky guys in your lineup. It's like you're gonna if all of them hit, the Millie winner is gonna have 300 points in it. Like you better make sure the other 2 players have the ability to put up 30 points, because you're not getting enough relative value on the field. And that's when you see people, they're like, I can't believe I scored 270 points and didn't whatever. It's like, well, what do you expect? And then you have the opposite direction of, I can't believe only 210 won the $1 million. And because these are the people that had the balls to build lineups that didn't have all the chalk in it. So you want to, that's the vomit stack theory in baseball. When people ask me on a 14-game slate, you go, why are you playing the Tigers? Do you think the Tigers are going to be the highest scoring team on the slate? I go, obviously not. They're horrible. I want to win when they score 9 runs. I don't need them to score 15 because they're so cheap. And then I need the 2 ace pitchers. That the only way you can play both the 2 ace pitchers together is by playing some garbage stack. If those 2 ace pitchers put up 40 points each, which they have the ceilings to do, and the Tigers put up 9 runs, they may not even be the highest scoring team on the slate. The Dodgers could put up 12 runs, but the Dodgers are also twice as expensive. So those Dodger stacks, they couldn't get the 2 ace pitchers in. So I want to win the low scoring slate where the Tigers' 9 runs is the best. Not because I think they're going to put up 20 runs, because I don't think so. And the same thing happens in NFL. Of do you think the garbage, Matt Schaub stack or whatever bullshit, Kyle Allen, which I didn't because there was no need to. You think they're going to put up the most points? It's like, no, I'm trying to win the low scoring slates. And on the low scoring slates, if you played Kyle Allen in your lineup, if you played Allen, McLaurin, Thomas, that type, ran it back with Cooper Kupp or something, the win condition of that lineup is not that game exploding. It's all the other games not exploding.
Exactly.
And them putting up enough points that you win a low-scoring slate. So you can't think in terms of, who do you think is going to be the highest scoring team? Well, it's going to be the teams with the highest totals. I mean, we could all see that. They have the highest probability. I don't think the Washington football team is putting up 40 points today. But if they put up 28, they're cheap enough that if all the other games fail, that could be the winning team.
Yep.
But this is the type of stuff we'll be talking about on a weekly basis, and we'll both still be assholes on Twitter throughout the week, right?
Exactly.
That's
exactly. I can't stop needling the people that get pissed when you say oh, you didn't play Aaron Jones, you fucking moron, and then the people get in there, oh, you stupid touts, whatever. It's too fun to needle those people.
Yeah, but you do it for needling purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
I do it for humor purposes.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time I'm self-deprecating. Most of the time, imagine not playing the Claypool Fulgham correlation. I can imagine. No, who does that?
It's funny that people still get mad about we go I've referenced Aaron Jones quite a bit just because it was such a really good example of a leverage opportunity. So the more you bring it up, these people get mad oh, you're still victory lapping Aaron Jones, whatever. No, I'm not victory lapping it. I played Dwayne fucking Haskins in my main Aaron Jones team. I'm not victory lapping shit.
You're victory lapping the concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't think of Aaron Jones. Think of the concept of Devontae Adams was mega chalk wide receiver, and you're playing the negatively correlated running back,
right?
Especially in the same range as another chalky running back. The Matrix. The leverage matrix was perfect. And I played a bunch of Aaron Jones. I didn't play a lot of them, but I mean, I saw that also. I didn't choose to double down, triple down on that. But it made sense in the lineups that didn't have Adams. It didn't mean I didn't have Adams. I still had plenty of Adams. Right? Because unlike you, I could play 8,000 lineups. So I could do whatever I want in whatever lineup I want. So that's why, who do you have in your player pool? Everyone. Who don't I have in my player pool? People that are projected for nothing practically. But are you running back your stacks with this guy? I'm running my stacks with that guy and this guy and this guy. I'm playing 20 of that stack. I'm not going to play the same run back. I'm going to have some type of diversification. So that's why the best plays type of like what can I stop asking me? Like what does it matter? Like it's better. It's much better if people showed me is like I'm looking to do this in GPP in this type of GPP, and I go if my answer is that's viable. It doesn't matter whether or not I'm doing it. It's just like I understand. That's why when you study other players, like all I want to do is understand. I'm like, okay, I see why they did that, right? I didn't choose to go in that direction, but I understand people that did, and that still could be plus EV. Just I chose not to go. I stacked the week before. I stacked the Bills Raiders game, and that failed. Whatever, but like you could understand, man. You look at the ownership, and okay, that all comes together. So I think this show will provide context to the play whatever you want, the concepts of what you needle people with what I preach about on shows, and in the the audio masterclass theoryofdfs.com. If you haven't picked that up yet. 15 hours. It's basically me and James McCool teaching you how to play DFS as a game, and it applies to any sport. So it's not like how do you play NFL? It's not broken up that way. It's like the actual statistical concepts and game theory of playing a competitive game, which just happens to be around sports performance. But I've joked that we could play supermarket DFS. Right? You're betting on how many pieces of lettuce there are, and what's the probability of them being over 50 gallons of milk? It's the same. It doesn't matter. The players are just like the pieces on the board. So Eric, people can find you. That typically this is whenever you listen to a podcast, it's over.
Yeah,
when you hear the words, when you hear the question, where can people find you?
Yeah, exactly. Every that's the thing. We got to come up with something else, I guess.
No, I want to be as trite as possible.
Everybody, we were talking. We got to get some intro, outro.
No music. There's no music on this shit. Why?
You just said you want to do the same shit that everybody else is doing with. Oh, where can I find you? Whatever. Where can people find your work? Like, okay, yeah. I will answer your question. I'm mostly on Roto-Grinders, providing. I do a bunch of different content, honestly. Showdown stuff, which I really enjoy. I think I'm pretty shitty showdown player, but I enjoy. That's
not a good endorsement. Did you go to tout school? That you didn't take tout 101. You don't say I do showdown premium content and I'm horrible at it.
Well, that's because you're supposed to listen to the analysis that I'm doing, and don't play the people that I'm playing.
Oh, so you do the analysis. So I'm doing the right thing by looking at your analysis and playing those lineups, and you're deciding on Showdown. But before we get out of here, are you playing the single entry stuff also, or are you playing the big field stuff?
I mean, I throw stuff into the, I make a team, one team.
Oh, okay, so so now I understand. Okay, so that now I just wanted to put it into context. That makes sense. Because I played the luck box, if you don't win first place, you lose money type of contest. So my lineups look like who knows what they could have ridiculous looking. But when you're only playing the smaller field stuff, I can understand that, when you see that you have 89% leverage on this construction with an RB2 and captain, that maybe that's not optimal for a 200-person contest.
Yeah, and even less, sometimes the even smaller fields. So, I'm learning as I'm doing the content how to apply these strategies to the contest that I'm playing for Showdown. And I don't think, most of the Showdown stuff that's out there is for these $1 million contests and, these absurd, prize structures and stuff. And we talked about plenty, that's not my focus. And so I'm trying to figure out the Showdown side of it. And I haven't figured it out yet, but the data and the analysis stuff, I have a guy who I work with. His name is Brennan Ruby, I think, at the DFS Advisor on Twitter. And he does some sports card stuff for RG. He does a little bit of everything, but he does awesome work helping me with some of the data viz stuff and data analysis. And it's great data. And then we do a few other things. I talk about, like you said, Q hunting with Squirrel Patrol, which is a similar, kind of concept to what we're doing here, but obviously about each slate and how we're attacking it from a leverage perspective. And then I do a similar article where I'm kind of walking through how I'm attacking a slate, breaking down a slate and constructing a properly leveraged tournament team.
Okay, so check that out at Roto Grinders Premium, because I'm there also. I mean,
Yep.
I'm doing a lot of the free shows, the ASA show, the Showdown shows, but I'm always in the Roto Grinders Discord because people ask about coaching and stuff. So if you're gonna obviously, if you want me in your pocket, you buy the 15-hour audio course, and you could re-listen to it. It's evergreen content. It's the same thing that I did in poker. I've read Theory of Poker. I've read Small Stakes Hold'em. I've read all the 2+2 books, Harrington on Hold'em. I've read them numerous times, multiple times, because you're always going to learn something as you play. Of like, am I doing this more? Am I not doing this enough? Oh, now I understand what they were talking about here because I had a hand that applied to. Like, you'll get a lot out of it. But if you want to ask me any like actual questions, you could always sign up for Roto Grinders Premium, and I'm in the Roto Grinders Discord. And if you ask me, do I play this guy or this guy, or do I like this guy? I go, I don't like anyone. That's typically my response. Like, do you like so and so this week? It's like, I don't know him. I don't know. I've never had lunch with them. I don't like anyone. What does liking people have to do with anything? I don't know. As long as they give me fantasy points, I love them. Right? That's all that matters to me. Right?
Right.
Okay. So I think this was a good first show. We'll be talking about subjects like this. You could email in questions at theoryofdfs.com. If you have a question about a previous slate, like not an upcoming who to play, we're not doing any of that crap. Like the decision that you made on a previous slate, or even a lineup that you had in a contest, and you're like, am I properly, did this make sense? Or just if you need clarification on subjects, because we talk about things that maybe a lot of the audience like doesn't know about, variance and EV. Maybe you need a little bit more explanation of that. So just email those questions in. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. And Eric left, right? I don't know where he went, but he left. He's sick of your questions. He's sick of my questions. So this has been the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports podcast and YouTube show. Subscribe there. Subscribe on iTunes. And we'll see you next week.